A teenager's body found dumped in the woods.
He sees a Rubbermaid bin. He lifts the lid and actually realizes that he is looking at a dead body. Cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation. He was thrown out like trash.
When I got that phone call, I was enraged.
His family explains he was supposed to be on a college admissions trip.
He was applying to university for art.
He was an artistic, intelligent, and beautiful soul.
But the investigation reveals it was all a lie.
I emailed the art school, but nobody emailed me back.
She had created and fabricated this entire story.
And when a surprising eyewitness steps forward, she points detectives to members of the victim's own family.
She took the time to learn what made him happy, and she used that as a way to kill him.
You're saying I murdered somebody. That's correct.
This is one of the saddest and most disturbing cases that I've ever worked.
She's just pure evil.
April 2nd, 2017. In Richmond, Virginia, a man is taking a break from work when he comes across a strange object.
As he's taking his smoke break and walking through the woods, he sees a Rubbermaid bin. And as he gets closer, he sees what he believes to be a shoe sticking out of the bin.
Curiosity, of course, strikes him, and he goes over.
He lifts the lid and actually realizes that he is looking at a dead body.
Henrico 911, what's the address of the emergency?
Yes, I found a dead body over in the woods. I just reported it. I don't know what to do.
Okay. I've got the police car. Were they still breathing at all?
No, they're in a tote, like in a tote.
They start taking photographs. What we see when we open the lid of the box is a young black male that the only way I can describe it is kind of like put in like an accordion. Knees tucked to the chest.
Detectives notice powder covering the body.
It was determined that it was lime, which will stop decay of human flesh. Detectives had a theory that lime was put in the box with the body so that whenever this individual was found, if ever, it would be very hard to determine the timing of the death and maybe how they died. Homicide detectives lay a white sheet down on the grass and roll the bin over so that they can remove the body. And it's at that point when they discover that actually behind the back of the individual, the wrists have been bound with a purple athletic type tape.
No cutting of the skin, no bruising of the body, nothing that would suggest there had been any trauma inflicted on this individual.
When they search the police database for missing persons, investigators find a possible match.
It was determined that there was a missing persons report for an individual that had been filed several weeks earlier by the Sisters of Martre Coles. They pulled up his DMV photograph in the system, and they were able to determine that those two photographs were a match and that we were dealing with the body of Martre Coles. This is a 19-year-old boy that no one has seen or heard from in weeks. No one was notified, including his family. And that was a strategic decision that was made by law enforcement because they felt like they were able to have the upper hand and potentially gain more information if everybody still thought Martre was just a missing person. There were a lot of questions that detectives had about who could have done this, when this death occurred, and why this would have happened.
Martre Coles was born on October 22, 1997, the youngest of 8 children raised by Maurice and Karina Coles.
As a kid, Martre was more of a loner due to him being the youngest. He was always under our mother. She would take him everywhere.
Martre was funny, sensitive, and he was very smart.
From an early age, he exhibited a passion for art.
My mom's father actually introduced Martre into drawing. I feel like drawing brought Martre was his peace.
He wanted to go to school for video games, like drawing for video games and stuff.
Tragedy changed Martre's plans for the future when his mother suddenly died of a heart attack in 2014.
My mom's passing affected Martre in a major way. He wasn't himself anymore. He was lost without my mother being around.
I feel like he changed, like, internally. I saw some depression. He really didn't know how he could function and move on without my mom.
Martre's siblings, being in their 20s, had already moved out of the home, which left him with only his grieving father, Maurice, for support.
They both were destroyed. They both were dealing with their own personal feelings behind the death. So my dad couldn't tend to Martre mourning when he was mourning that he lost his wife.
One of Maurice's friends and co-workers, Denise Gay, saw what was happening and offered to help. She was a single mother raising 5 children of her own.
My mother is like the typical, like what most people end up seeing as the mother bear.
Denise was kind of Maurice's shoulder to cry on when his wife died.
Denise treated Martre like a son. And as she spent more time at the house, her friendship with Maurice blossomed into romance.
I was feeling like Maurice is going to end up being like the last relationship that she would have for a significant amount of time because they both seem like very happy.
Before long, Maurice invited Denise and her youngest daughter to move in with them.
Even though Martre's father was not married to Denise, they were living in somewhat of a step-family situation.
I didn't care to get to know her. I don't know what type of woman would move into a dead woman's home within a month. She didn't rub me the right way when I met her. My father, he was a Rolling Stone. That's been presented to me all of my life, so that wasn't really shocking.
Martre, he was still mourning his mother, but after a while, maybe like a couple months or so, he did start warming up to my mother because she was explaining to him, was like, I'm not here to replace your mother, but I am a person who is going to be here for you.
By 2017, Martre seemed to be recovering from his grief. He'd even started dating.
Martre had a unique relationship with his girlfriend. They had met in high school, and they actually communicated almost 24 hours a day.
He was also bonding with Denise's children.
We both did want to work in like the game industry, him on the art side, me on the more like coding programming side of it.
He was applying to Full Sail University for art.
Denise was assisting him, like reaching out to the counselor to get a tour. Martre was very excited about going to Full Sail, and that they contacted him and that they were in a different state. He was excited about possibly starting something new.
But Martre never got the chance to fulfill his dreams. Instead, he's become the victim of an unthinkable homicide. And Virginia police are beginning their investigation.
Martre Coles' body was taken to the office of the medical examiner for an autopsy.
The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation.
There are 2 substances found in the bloodstream of this individual, that being trazodone and traces of GHB. GHB, of course, being the street name for what we call the date rape drug. Trazodone is used often for people who are having trouble sleeping.
Potentially what happened was this person was drugged, passed out, and maybe even put in the box in that particular accordion position while still alive and suffocated inside of the box.
The just callousness of the actions. Why did a 19-year-old have to die like this?
Coming up, investigators find a potential eyewitness.
You all right? All good? You got in trouble, right?
As she's in her room watching TV, she hears a scream coming from the room next door.
When detectives study Martre's missing persons report, they learn it was filed 20 days earlier on March 13th by his sisters, Michelle and Marquisha Coles. Using the information provided by the sisters in their report, homicide investigators are able to start piecing together the events of the day Martre vanished.
The last time I saw Martre, we had a birthday get-together for my sister. And I took him back home so he could get ready to go and visit the school.
He was going to be going on a trip out of town to Full Sail University in Florida, where he was hoping to be admitted as an art student.
According to the report, Martre needed to put the finishing touches on an art project for his application before leaving for Florida.
He was to take it to school with him, and it was a mask of his face.
The sisters wished him luck and went home to rest.
I went to sleep. I woke up to about 80 missed calls.
She had numerous calls missed from Martre's girlfriend. She is very concerned that something has happened to him.
Martre was not responding to her messages.
Michelle reached out to her sister, Marquisha, and they head over there to the residence.
When the sisters returned to the house just a few hours after dropping off their brother, Denise told them Martre had already left. She told them while packing, Martre realized he left his wallet at Michelle's house.
The last time she saw him, he was walking out of the house saying he was going to walk to Michelle's to get his wallet.
But Martre never showed up.
We kind of rode around the neighborhood just to see if we saw him walking up the street, and there was no sign of him. We went to and filed a police report the next morning.
They document the report and put it into the system, but unfortunately, because he is legally an adult at the time, they're not going to put out a notice for people to look for him.
Before they can interview Martre's sisters, investigators make an alarming connection.
Another member of the police department came to them and said, "Hey, this is triggering a memory of a report from not even a week ago.
2 weeks after Martre had gone missing, a security alarm had gone off at the Coles house.
2 Henrico police officers had responded, and when they got there late at night, the 2 people that were at the home were LaToya Gay, which is Denise's oldest daughter, and then her younger sister, Denise's youngest daughter.
When the officers asked LaToya what happened, she said it was her younger sister acting out.
The 12-year-old gets mad at her older sister, and she actually activates an alarm, and law enforcement responds. Henrico police have body-worn cameras, so we're able to watch this interaction of what unfolds.
You all right? All good? You got in trouble, right?
Can you explain to her that everything she does has a consequence?
Yeah, I think we've had that talk before.
So police had been out to this house before.
The youngest daughter has been getting in trouble lately. Was the reason why the one police officer had that familiarity with the young lady.
They determined that there was really nothing wrong other than 2 sisters that were having a dispute.
Before the officers left, the youngest daughter asked to speak with the officer she recognized. Once they were in private, she told him a disturbing story.
What'd she say? Tell me this one.
The 12-year-old says it happened on the morning of March 12th. As she's in her room watching TV, she hears a scream coming from the room next door. So she got up, she goes into the hallway, gets to the door of Martre's bedroom, and looks in.
She had seen her mother and her sister pin him to the ground, one at his feet and one on his chest.
She describes something that looked kind of white on his face, but then catches eyes with her mother, who gives her the hand gesture to move on and go away. She went back to her room, and the next thing she recalls is hearing a noise, and she peeks open from her bedroom door to see her sister pushing a plastic bin down the hallway.
Are you being truthful, or are you making this up because you're mad?
At the time, officers didn't know what to make of the story, so they called her mother, Denise.
She's accusing LaToya, a sister she had just gotten in a fight with, so it sounds like trying to get back at her sister. Denise pretty much confirms she thinks that's what it is.
Make up a lot of stuff trying to get out of trouble, but you can't get out of trouble.
At the time, the officers chalked it up to an overactive imagination. They file a report, but don't investigate further. But now, detectives wonder if it was more than that.
She mentions Martre's body being put in a bin and taken away from the house. And when they realize how specific that description is and how closely it matches the way that Martre's body was found, they then become very concerned that it is possible this little girl was telling the truth. Immediately, LaToya and Denise are now suspects.
April 3rd, 2017. It's been 1 day since the body of 19-year-old Martre Coles was found dumped in the Virginia woods. Now armed with body cam footage of Denise Gay's daughter describing Martre's death, detectives proceed with caution. They ask Martre's older sisters to come in for an interview without informing them they've found his body.
The investigators know that something isn't quite right with Denise Gay. So there is a decision made that it was not going to be shared with the family at that time, that a body was found on April 2nd.
They ended up calling us down to the precinct for further questions on the relationship between Denise and Martre.
According to the sisters, Martre and Denise got along well enough in the beginning.
Martre told me that his relationship with Denise was pretty good, that she would talk to him, help him with like homework and things like that, help him with his art.
His bigger problems were really with Denise's daughter. She was a very troubled young girl. She would pick fights with people.
She had been, taking his stuff and destroying his things and, stuff like that.
Okay.
She was drawing stuff on the floors and trying to make it seem like as if Trey was drawing it. Just a lot of weird things started happening in the home.
Whenever Maurice would discover something had happened, Denise would say that the problems were Martre's fault to cover for her daughter.
The sisters reveal the issues between Martre and Denise's 12-year-old daughter only got worse.
They got into physical fights where they would push each other and yell and scream.
She was stabbing him and stuff.
She picked up some scissors and allegedly stabbed Martre in the head. Denise hid that from Maurice.
I asked Martre, have you told my mom? Have you told Maurice that all these things are happening? He's like, yeah, I did. And they say they're going to handle it. I'm just going to stay in my room and keep to myself.
According to his sisters, Martre began to suspect Denise was doing more than just hiding her daughter's behavior. She was encouraging it.
Martre expressed to me that he felt like Denise was like trying to create a wedge between him and my father.
I think Denise wanted Martre gone because that was something of my mother's left in the home, and she was very jealous of my mom.
And what was his relationship with your dad like?
Iffy. Like, he felt like my dad didn't like him. He felt like my dad didn't want him there.
Marquisha and Michelle say it was one of the reasons why Martre was looking forward to college.
He was excited about possibly starting something new, getting away from everything that was going on.
But in the weeks since his disappearance, they discovered something strange.
I emailed the art school, but nobody emailed me back.
His girlfriend knew that he had been communicating with Full Sail University, and they shared email information. She logged into his emails and looked through them.
She said that he was having a conversation with someone named Sheila Crenshaw.
Martre's girlfriend did some digging of her own and said, wait a second, this email is written pretty poorly, and then it's written and sent from a Gmail address. No legit university is going to have a Gmail address.
When the detectives reach out to Full Sail University, they find out that there is no one by the name of Sheila Crenshaw.
Someone had come up with Sheila's name and was trying to trick Martre into thinking that this woman was talking to him from the administration office at Full Sail University.
Coming up, a mysterious figure returns to the scene of the crime.
There are some still shot frames of an SUV and someone wearing a hoodie.
And investigators close in on their killers.
What happened?
You killed him in your house. The last time you saw him, he was in a storage bin.
Just 24 hours into the hunt for 19-year-old Martre Coles' killer, investigators have a possible eyewitness to his death, and now evidence that someone tricked him into going on a college tour.
Someone went through a lot of trouble in this ruse to get Martre to believe he had been accepted at Full Sail University.
A search warrant is obtained and is executed on April 3rd at the residence. At that time, nobody is actually in the house. We are going to want to see if we can find anything in the bedroom itself that might help identify what these two women were doing to Martre.
Detectives find nothing to support the idea that Martre left for his college visit.
Everything that he owned appeared to still be present in that room. His computer, his backpack.
But there is also nothing to support Denise's daughter's story about witnessing a crime.
During the search warrant, other things that were taken for evidence included laptops that belonged to Denise Gay and Martre's own laptop. Ultimately, they are turned over to the FBI for a full analysis of the data.
As the search continues, Denise's older daughter, Latoya, shows up at the house.
It's very apparent that she's uncomfortable and she's agitated, and she actually walks outside and sits down in her car and has a phone conversation that's fairly lengthy.
The next thing that is very interesting is that she actually leaves the residence before the search is completed.
Because of her demeanor, detectives ask other officers to actually follow her to see where she goes.
Officers follow Latoya to a familiar location.
Latoya led them right to where Martre's body was found. Investigators hadn't released any information to the family about the body. The only one that could possibly know where that body was located was the killer.
What we believe she was doing at that time was trying to see if there was any police activity that had the body been found.
Obviously, they immediately realized that the story provided by the youngest daughter is highly likely to be accurate. Another officer indicates that he actually has a motion-activated hunting camera, and they decide that it would be interesting to see if anybody else returns to that site.
And it was placed on a tree that would capture both the location of where the box was found as well as the bit of road.
5 days later, the camera captures grainy images of someone entering the dump site.
During the later part of April 7th, there are some still shot frames of what first looks like a SUV that is parked right there at the opening of the wooded area. Then we have another silhouette image that the best that can be described is someone who appears to be wearing a hoodie. There's no other defining aspects to this silhouette, nothing to suggest if it's a man or a woman.
Although detectives cannot identify the figure, they do notice something about the vehicle.
It was a dark SUV with flashy rims.
Martre's father, Maurice Coles, owns a large black SUV, and his vehicle actually had some pretty unique rims.
If we were making a conclusion that that was Maurice's car, we had to ask ourselves, Did Maurice Coles have something to do with the death of his son, Martre?
The list of potential conspirators in Martre Coles' murder has now grown to include his father, Maurice.
Maurice's black SUV was driven by himself and Denise. Nobody else had access to use that vehicle. The detectives decide that they need to verify the whereabouts of Denise and Maurice at the time that those photographs were taken.
Both Maurice and Denise work at a processing plant in Smithfield, Virginia, about an hour and a half southeast of Richmond. So police check their work schedules around the time the SUV was spotted at the dump site.
By using the cameras of the parking lot, but more importantly, the electronic time card, we were confident that Maurice Coles was in Smithfield during the evening hours of April 7th. That was not him in the image.
The evidence might rule out Maurice, but it further incriminates Denise. Records indicate she left work early on April 7th.
Denise is actually on security footage leaving the building and getting into the black SUV.
We were able to use the technology for the GPS location to track Denise's phone.
The cell phone data shows that Denise leaves Smithfield and comes back north, and it actually traces her going right past the location where Martre's body had been found.
Since only the killer could know the location of Martre's body, investigators can now tie Denise to the murder.
The evidence also confirmed that the 12-year-old girl is telling the truth. Her story was legit, and the implications of Denise and LaToya being involved were true.
On April 10th, Denise is brought in for questioning.
Okay, and I don't think that it's a surprise why you're here. Right?
You're saying I murdered somebody.
That's correct. You know why you're here.
No. What happened?
You killed him in your house. The last time you saw him, he was in a storage bin.
She just says, I don't know what you're talking about, and will not admit to anything.
Following the interview, detectives place Denise under arrest. Their next target is LaToya.
What we learned was that LaToya Gay had actually left the Commonwealth, and we find her in South Carolina with some family members.
You can't run away from it anymore, okay? There's a murder warrant for you.
For me? Why is it for me?
And it almost comes across as she's not surprised that they're arresting someone for murder, but she's surprised that they're arresting her for murder.
The initial idea was that we would maybe see if LaToya would cooperate and testify against her mother, but it was very clear that she was not going to be cooperating.
Now that police have their suspects in custody, they're able to notify Martre's sisters of his death.
I was enraged. When I got that phone call, everything just was checked off of how I felt about Denise from the beginning. I knew she was pure evil when I met her.
It was very difficult for them to know that we had known for many days before they did that their brother was dead. But they ultimately understood the decision. Once we've arrested LaToya and Denise, we still don't really understand why this crime has occurred. We keep doing further investigation and did criminal background checks on both of them.
That check reveals Denise has an extensive criminal record.
And what was interesting is that a lot of her criminal history related to fraudulent behavior and lies and deceit.
The FBI's analysis of Denise's laptop reveals her latest fraud.
Investigators found the email account of Sheila Crenshaw on Denise's computer.
Denise Gay was in fact this Sheila Crenshaw.
She had created and fabricated this entire Full Sail University story so that she could explain why later he would be absent and no one could find him.
We are also learning about some of the searches that were done on Denise's computer regarding Lyme, GHB, suffocation, and why would someone be asking for those types of questions if they didn't play a role in some particular actions.
Despite these discoveries, the case against Denise remains largely circumstantial. With a 12-year-old as their only eyewitness, prosecutors hope it will be enough to secure a conviction.
What was the motive for why these two grown women would harm this young man in the way that they did?
On December 8th, 2017, Denise and LaToya Gay stand trial for the murder of Martre Coles.
Our best theory of a motive relates to Denise's relationship with Maurice. Maurice lost his wife, who he dearly loved.
Denise looked at Martre as being the last thing that was reminding Maurice of what he had had before.
Denise snapped because jealousy got the best of her.
Prosecutors say the evidence shows Denise plotted for weeks to kill Martre, and she manipulated LaToya into helping her.
Denise saw her children as accessories to her criminal behavior.
Denise's youngest daughter is the state's star witness.
We believe that she drugged him, and once he became somewhat woozy, LaToya comes into the room to assist her in holding him down. The evidence from the youngest daughter is that Denise is actually on his chest. We don't know if he suffocated from the weight or if they were just able to take control of him. He was thrown out like trash. He was put in a Rubbermaid bin and tossed in the woods.
The defense attempts to undermine the young girl's testimony.
The defense wanted the jury to believe that this troubled 12-year-old is actually the killer.
Not only was Denise Gay going to not accept any responsibility, but that worse, she would try to pin this case on her 12-year-old daughter.
When the jury delivers its verdict, it comes as a shock to everyone in the courtroom.
They convicted both Denise and LaToya with conspiracy, but they didn't actually convict them on first-degree murder. The jury was hung, which to this day I still don't understand.
Prosecutors immediately prepare for a retrial, and a new witness comes forward.
Within a couple of days, Maurice Coles calls detectives.
Seeing the actual evidence in front of him made him believe what he had never wanted to believe before, that a woman that he had brought into his home and he thought cared for him and his family had actually killed his son.
Maurice was cleaning the house out, and he had found Denise's purse in this closet. In the purse was her wallet and her cell phone. In the wallet, we found the actual receipt of the purchase of a shovel.
And once we had her physical phone, we had the actual text messages that she and LaToya had been exchanging.
Denise was communicating with her daughter, LaToya, that she could not find the body on April 7th. That gave us clear and convincing evidence that that was in fact Denise Gay in that image of the game camera.
The new evidence makes the outcome of the second trial less uncertain.
Ultimately, both women wound up being convicted of first-degree murder.
Denise Gay was given a life plus 10 years sentence. LaToya Gay is going to be serving a 30-year sentence.
I don't think that a mother with any type of compassion for her children would put her daughters in that type of predicament.
Denise is just pure evil.
This case is one of the saddest and most disturbing cases that I've ever worked. She took the time to get to know Martre and learn what made him happy, and she used that as a way to kill him.
I do still talk to both my mother and my sister on a regular basis. I do still believe they might not have done it, but Martre should be remembered as this really outgoing, kind person.
If Martre was alive today, I would see him living somewhere in California, being an artist.
I just want him to be remembered as artistic, intelligent, and beautiful soul.
The pursuit of justice often begins in the most quiet and unexpected places. On April 2nd, 2017, a citizen taking a brief outdoor break from work in a wooded area near Gorman Road in Henrico, Virginia, noticed an object that seemed entirely out of place among the trees and fallen leaves. It was a large plastic storage bin, manufactured by the Rubbermaid Company. As the individual drew closer, curiosity turned to concern upon noticing what appeared to be a shoe protruding from the edge of the container. Upon lifting the lid, the citizen made the tragic discovery of a deceased young male. The local emergency services were contacted immediately, and patrol officers, along with homicide detectives, quickly arrived to secure the scene. When the investigators opened the container, they observed the body of a young black male who had been placed in an extremely confined position, with his knees tucked tightly toward his chest. The scene was processed vekepte, hot, immense care and respect for the deceased. Detectives noticed that a white powder covered the victim, which forensic analysts later determined to be lime, also known as calcium hydroxide. In the realm of criminal behavior, individuals sometimes believe that lime will halt the natural process of decomposition or mask the scent, hoping to obscure the timeline of a crime and hinder the work of medical examiners. However, science often works against such misguided theories, as the chemical properties of lime do not easily erase the evidence left behind. As the homicide detectives carefully removed the body from the container, they discovered further evidence of foul play. The wrists of the young man had been bound behind his back with purple athletic tape. Despite these bindings, there were no initial signs of severe external trauma, no deep bruising, and no lacerations that would point to a physical struggle involving weapons. The lack of obvious physical injuries prompted investigators to rely heavily on the upcoming autopsy to determine how this life had been cut short. To identify the young man, detectives ran a search through the missing persons database for the surrounding region. They quickly located a report that had been filed 20 days earlier on March 13, 2017, by the sisters of 19-year-old Martre Lamonte Coles. By comparing the state database photograph from the Department of Motor Vehicles with the physical features of the deceased, the investigators confirmed that they had found Martre Coles. Law enforcement officers made a strategic decision to temporarily withhold the news of the discovery from the public and the family. While this decision is incredibly difficult for grieving relatives to experience later, it is a calculated measure used by investigators to maintain an advantage over potential suspects. When perpetrators believe their actions remain hidden, they are far more likely to behave carelessly, speak freely, or return to the scene of the crime. This silence allowed detectives to begin piecing together the final weeks of Martre Coles' life without alerting those who might have played a role in his disappearance. Mart Coles was born on October 22, 1997, the youngest of 8 children, raised by Maurice and Karina Coles. Those who knew him described him as a sensitive, intelligent, and highly creative young man. He possessed a profound talent for drawing and aspired to build a career as an artist in the video game industry. However, his life took a difficult turn in 2014, when his mother passed away suddenly from a heart attack. Martre was only 16 years old at the time, and the loss of his mother deeply affected his emotional well-being. He struggled with feelings of sadness and isolation, as his older siblings had already moved out of the family home to establish their own lives, leaving Martre alone with his grieving father, Maurice. During this period of mourning, a co-worker of Maurice named Denise Gay stepped forward to offer support. She was a mother of 5 children who positioned herself as a helpful and comforting presence in the household. Over time, her relationship with Maurice transitioned into a romance, and she eventually moved into the Coles residence along Ve Kepitahat, her youngest daughter. While Martre's father welcomed the companionship, Martre's older sisters felt an immediate sense of unease regarding the rapid changes in their father's home. Despite their reservations, Martre initially tried to adapt to the new household structure. Denise Gay presented herself as a supportive figure, offering to help Martre Ve Kep Ite Hat his schoolwork and his applications to higher education. By the beginning of 2017, Martre seemed to be focusing on his future. He was in a dedicated relationship with a girlfriend whom he communicated with constantly, and he was actively preparing to apply to Full Sail University, an institution in Florida known for its programs in digital media and art. Denise Gay had volunteered to assist him with this process, acting as a liaison between Martre and the admissions department. However, the domestic environment within the home had grown increasingly hostile. Tensions had escalated between Martre and Denise's daughters, particularly during visits from her older daughter, LaToya Gay. The siblings recalled that unusual incidents began to occur, such as drawings appearing on the floors that seemed intended to frame Martre for destructive behavior. There were also physical altercations that Denise allegedly concealed from Maurice, which further isolated Martre within his own living space. Martre expressed to his sisters that he felt Denise was actively trying to create a distance between him and his father, prompting him to spend most of his time isolated in his bedroom, looking forward to the day he could leave for college. The investigation took a significant step forward when detectives examined the details of the missing-ters report. On March 12, 2017, Martre's sisters had dropped him off at the family home so he could prepare for an upcoming trip to Florida to visit the university campus. According to the plan, Martre was supposed to bring a creative project as part of his application, specifically a plaster mask cast from his own face. When his sisters returned to the residence a few hours later, Denise informed them that Martre had already departed. She claimed that while packing, Martre realized he had left his wallet at his sister's house and had decided to walk there to retrieve it. Martre never arrived, and his cell phone suddenly stopped responding to messages, which immediately alarmed his girlfriend and sisters. A critical breakthrough occurred when investigators connected Martre's disappearance to an incident that had taken place at the Coles home 2 weeks after he went missing. Henrico police officers had responded to a late-night security alarm at the residence. On that night, officers encountered Latoya Gay and her 12-year-old sister. When questioned, the older sister dismissed the alarm as a minor dispute, but the 12-year-old requested to speak with an officer privately. Once away from her family, the young girl described a disturbing event she had witnessed on the morning of March 12, 2017. She stated that while watching television, she heard a physical struggle and a scream from Martre's bedroom. When she looked into the hallway, she saw her mother, Denise, and her sister, Latoya, pinning Martre to the floor. She recalled seeing something white covering his face, and when her mother noticed her, Denise gestured for her to return to her room. Later that morning, the young girl reported hearing a noise and peeking out to see her sister pushing a large plastic storage bin down the hallway. At the time of the alarm call, the officers had reached out to Denise, who dismissed her youngest daughter's account as an attempt to get her older sister into trouble following a domestic argument. However, once homicide detectives compared the details of the young girl's statement with the physical condition of Martre's body and the Rubbermaid bin found on Gorman Road, the incredible accuracy of her description became undeniable. It was clear that the child had witnessed a tragedy, and both Denise Gay and Latoya Gay were immediately elevated to the status of primary suspects. The physical autopsy of Martre Coles provided critical scientific data that aligned with the emerging narrative. The medical examiner determined that the cause of death was asphyxiation. Toxicology reports revealed the presence of 2 distinct substances in Martre's bloodstream, namely trazodone, a medication commonly prescribed for sleep difficulties, and gamma-hydroxybutyrate, a central nervous system depressant often associated with drug-facilitated crimes. The presence of these substances supported the theory that Martre had been chemically incapacitated before or during the physical assault, rendering him unable to defend himself as he was suffocated. The level of planning involved in this crime became clear as detectives explored the circumstances surrounding Martre's college application. Martre's girlfriend had accessed his email accounts and discovered a series of poorly written messages from a person identifying herself as Sheila Crenshaw, an administrator at Full Sail University. When investigators contacted the university, They confirmed that no one by that name worked at the institution, and the email address used was a standard free webmail account rather than an official academic domain. A subsequent forensic analysis of Denise Gay's laptop, conducted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, revealed that Denise had created the fictional persona of Sheila Crenshaw. She had used this fabricated identity to construct an elaborate deception, convincing Martra that he had been accepted and needed to prepare a plaster face mask, thereby creating a perfect cover story to explain his sudden absence to his family. On April 3, 2017, investigators executed a search warrant at the Coles residence. Although the home was empty at the time, detectives noted that Martra's computer, backpack, and personal belongings were still in his bedroom, contradicting the claim that he had packed his bags for a journey to Florida. During the execution of the search warrant, LaToya Gay arrived at the property. Officers noted that she appeared highly anxious and uncomfortable. She spent a considerable amount of time making phone calls from her vehicle before abruptly leaving the scene. Undercover officers followed her vehicle as she drove directly to the wooded area on Gorman Road, where Martra's body had been discovered the previous day. Because the police had not released any public details regarding the recovery of the body, LaToya's decision to visit this specific location provided powerful evidence of her direct knowledge of the crime. To monitor the dump site, investigators deployed a motion-activated game camera hidden in the trees near the roadway. On the evening of April 7, 2017, the camera captured grainy images of a dark sport utility vehicle parking near the woods and a figure wearing a hooded sweatshirt walking toward the site. The vehicle possessed highly distinctive custom wheels, which matched a sport utility vehicle owned by Maurice Coles. Because Maurice and Denise were the only individuals with access to this vehicle, detectives had to determine if the father was involved in his son's death. Investigators reviewed the employment and timekeeping records for Smithfield Foods, where both Maurice and Denise worked. The electronic time cards and parking lot security footage confirmed that Maurice was at work in Smithfield, Virginia, during the hours when the vehicle was photographed at the dump site. However, Denise had left her shift early that afternoon. Global positioning system data from Denise's mobile phone tracked her route directly from her workplace to the exact coordinates of the Gorman Road dump site, confirming that she was the individual captured by the game camera. On April 10, 2017, Denise Gay was arrested and charged in connection with the homicide. Shortly thereafter, LaToya Gay was located in South Carolina and taken into custody. Despite the growing mountain of evidence, Denise maintained her innocence during police questioning, offering no explanation for the digital and physical clues connecting her to the crime. The legal proceedings began on December 8, 2017. The prosecution presented a case based on step-family jealousy and control. They argued that Denise viewed Martre as a constant reminder of Maurice's deceased wife and sought to remove him from the home to solidify her own influence over Maurice and the household. The state's key witness was the 12-year-old daughter, who courageously testified about the struggle she witnessed in Martre's bedroom. Despite her testimony, the defense sought to cast doubt on her credibility, even attempting to suggest that the young girl herself was responsible for the violence. The initial trial ended with convictions for conspiracy to commit murder, but the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict on the charge of first-degree murder, resulting in a partial mistrial. Following the trial, Maurice Coles assisted the prosecution by thoroughly searching his residence. In a closet, he located a purse belonging to Denise that had been left behind. Inside the purse, investigators discovered Denise's personal wallet and mobile phone. The wallet contained a retail receipt showing the cash purchase of a shovel shortly before the crime. A search of the mobile phone revealed text messages sent between Denise and LaToya on April 7, 2017. In the messages, Denise expressed frustration that she could not locate the container at the dump site, explaining why she had returned to the area where the game camera photographed her. This new evidence provided the missing link, proving beyond a doubt that Denise was actively managing the cover-up of the crime. In the second trial, the juries found both women guilty of first-degree murder. Denise Gay was sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 10 years, while LaToya Gay received a 30-year prison sentence. The resolution of this case brought a sense of justice to Martre's sisters and father, though the pain of his loss remains a permanent scar on their lives. Martre is remembered by his family not for the tragic circumstances of his passing, but as a kind, gentle, and highly talented artist who deserved a long and peaceful life. Analyzing the psychological motives behind this crime reveals a dark intersection of domestic control, insecurity, and manipulation. Denise Gay's actions appear to have been driven by an intense desire to dominate her romantic partner's life and household. In many blended family situations, the introduction of a new partner can bring natural adjustments, but in toxic dynamics, a new partner may view the existing children as obstacles to their influence. Martre, as the youngest child, who was deeply attached to the memory of his late mother, represented an emotional connection that Denise could not control. Rather than attempting to foster a healthy, supportive relationship, she chose a path of systematic isolation, ultimately escalating to physical violence. The frequency of domestic crimes within blended families often points to unresolved grief, rapid household transitions, and a lack of open communication. When a family experiences the sudden loss of a parent, the remaining members are highly vulnerable. Bringing a new partner into the home too quickly, without allowing children adequate time to process their grief, can create deep-seated resentment and instability. In this case, the rapid transition allowed a manipulative individual to exploit the family's vulnerability, establishing control before the children could find their footing. The investigative journey highlights the critical role of modern technology and traditional police work in resolving complex cases. The primary clues that allowed the police to identify the perpetrators were not single pieces of dramatic evidence, but rather a combination of digital footprints and physical observations. The digital analysis of the fake email account, the recovery of computer search histories, and the tracking of mobile phone location data exposed the planning and execution of the crime. Additionally, the simple use of a motion-activated game camera at the dump site proved invaluable, catching the suspect red-handed as she attempted to revisit the scene. This demonstrates that criminals, despite their attempts to plan elaborate cover stories, almost always leave behind physical and digital traces that can be reconstructed by diligent investigators. There are profound life lessons to be drawn from this tragedy to help prevent similar occurrences in the future. First, it is vital for families to prioritize emotional healing and seek professional support after experiencing a devastating loss. Rushing into new domestic arrangements before the emotional foundation is secure can expose vulnerable family members to risk. Second, Open communication between parents and children is essential. Parents must remain attentive to the concerns of their children regarding new individuals brought into the home, ensuring that every member of the household feels safe and heard. Furthermore, the community must remain vigilant regarding online communications, educating young people to verify the authenticity of academic and professional opportunities, particularly when correspondence originates from unofficial email domains, is a crucial step in preventing deceptive schemes. Finally, the experience of the investigating forces in this case offers valuable strategies for resolving complex investigations more rapidly. The success of the Henrico Police Department relied on the integration of various departments, from patrol officers documenting domestic calls to digital forensics experts analyzing electronic devices. By maintaining a centralized database of incident reports, such as the initial home alarm call, detectives were able to quickly connect seemingly unrelated events to the larger homicide investigation. This underscores the importance of thoroughly documenting and reviewing every domestic disturbance, as the quiet testimonies of young observers often hold the key to uncovering the truth. Through diligence, modern science, and a commitment to justice, the truth was ultimately revealed, ensuring that those responsible were held accountable while honoring the memory of a bright young artist whose legacy continues to inspire his loved ones. The complex dynamics of blended families often present unique challenges, but in rare and deeply tragic circumstances, these environments can become the breeding ground for extreme psychological manipulation and hostility. When examining cases of domestic harm, criminologists often point to the toxic combination of intense jealousy, insecurity, and the desire for total control as primary motives. In a healthy household, the arrival of a new parental figure should represent a source of stability and support, particularly after a family has experienced a devastating loss. However, when an incoming partner harbors deep-seated insecurities and a fraudulent disposition, the existing members of the household, especially the most vulnerable, can be viewed not as loved ones, but as obstacles to be removed. The frequency of these domestic tragedies often increases when there is a significant power imbalance within the home. Young people transitioning into adulthood are in a naturally vulnerable phase of life, balancing the desire for independence with the continued need for parental support. When a manipulative individual enters the family structure, they may systematically work to isolate the victim, creating a wedge between the child and the biological parent. This isolation is achieved through a combination of subtle manipulation, false accusations, and the fabrication of conflict. By slowly eroding the trust between a parent and child, the perpetrator creates an environment where the victim's concerns are dismissed, leaving them with limited avenues of escape or protection. A critical analysis of these cases reveals a profound irony in the minds of such perpetrators. Individuals who engage in complex, premeditated plots often suffer from an inflated sense of their own intelligence, a psychological phenomenon where they believe they can construct a flawless deception that will easily baffle investigators. In reality, their schemes are highly fragile, built upon a foundation of easily traceable digital footprints, inconsistent statements, and physical evidence that inevitably points back to them. The sophistication they believe they possess is merely a facade, easily dismantled by the methodical and scientific approach of modern law enforcement. The investigation of jhene complex cases relies heavily on a combination of digital forensics, physical evidence, and the careful analysis of behavioral anomalies. While a perpetrator may attempt to obscure the physical timeline of a crime by using chemical agents such as lime, which they falsely believe will halt natural decomposition, this action itself serves as a clear indicator of premeditation and intent. Furthermore, the digital trail left by modern technology is nearly impossible to fully erase. The creation of fictitious personas, fake email accounts, and fraudulent academic correspondence leaves a distinct electronic signature that forensic specialists can trace directly to the suspect's personal devices. Additionally, the integration of passive surveillance, such as motion-activated cameras and localized cell tower data, provides investigators with objective, undeniable evidence of a suspect's movements, rendering fabricated alibis completely useless. To prevent such heartbreaking occurrences, communities and families must remain vigilant and recognize the warning signs of domestic isolation and manipulation. It is vital to maintain open, non-judgmental lines of communication with young relatives, ensuring they always have a safe space to voice their concerns. When a young person expresses feeling unsafe or targeted within their own home, these reports must be taken seriously and investigated thoroughly by both family members and protective services. Education regarding digital safety and the verification of academic and professional correspondence is also essential, as predators often use the promise of future success as a tool of entrapment. For law enforcement agencies, the speed of apprehension in complex missing persons cases can be significantly increased through the early deployment of multidisciplinary investigative teams. Recognizing that missing persons reports involving young adults are not always standard runaways is critical. By immediately integrating digital forensic specialists and conducting prompt interviews with close friends and siblings, police can uncover patterns of deception before critical evidence is lost or destroyed. The implementation of community-based reporting systems and the rapid analysis of localized surveillance footage are also invaluable tools in establishing a timeline of events during the crucial early hours of an investigation. Let us now reflect deeply on the memory of Marit Lamont-Coles, a young man whose life was filled with artistic promise, kindness, and a gentle spirit. Born on the 22nd day of October in the year 1997, Martre was the youngest of 8 siblings. Raised in a large and loving family by his parents, Maurice and Karina Coles, he was known for his sensitive nature, his quiet intelligence, and a deep passion for visual art. From a very young age, Martre found solace and expression through drawing, a talent nurtured by his grandfather. He dreamed of channeling this creativity into a career, hoping to study digital art and design characters for the video game industry. However, the foundation of Martre's world was shattered in the year 2014, when his mother suddenly passed away from a heart condition. This profound loss deeply affected the 16-year-old, leaving him feeling lost and isolated. As his older siblings had already established their own independent lives, Martre was left living alone with his grieving father, Maurice. Both father and son were struggling to cope with their immense grief, creating a quiet and somewhat distant environment within the household. It was during this period of vulnerability that Denise Monique Gay, a co-worker of Maurice, stepped into their lives, showing an initial warmth and offering a supportive shoulder to the grieving father. Denise quickly integrated herself into the family. Within a very short period of time, following the passing of Karina, Denise and her youngest daughter moved into the family home. While Maurice found comfort in this new relationship, The transition was challenging for Martre, who was still deeply mourning his mother. Despite his initial reservations, Martre tried to adapt, and over time, he began to warm up to Denise as she assured him that she was there to support him. As the months progressed, the household dynamic grew increasingly tense. The home now included Maurice, Martre, Denise, and her youngest daughter, while Denise's older daughter, Latoya Shantice Gay, visited frequently. Conflict began to arise, primarily centering around the behavior of Denise's daughters. Martre, who preferred to keep to himself and focus on his art, found himself the target of unexplained hostility and erratic behavior. When household items were damaged or unusual disturbances occurred, Denise systematically shifted the blame onto Martre, protecting her own children while painting Martre as the source of conflict. Despite these growing domestic challenges, Martre remained focused on his future. By the year 2017, he was actively preparing to pursue his higher education. He set his sights on Full Sail University, an institution in Florida renowned for its digital arts programs. Because Maurice felt unfamiliar with the complexities of the college admissions process, Denise volunteered to assist Martre, taking charge of the communications with the university and acting as an intermediary. Martre was thrilled when he began receiving emails from a university representative named Sheila Crenshaw. The correspondence indicated that he was being considered for admission and invited him to travel to Florida for a campus tour and interview. As part of the application process, the emails instructed Martre to create a unique art piece to bring with him, specifically a plaster mask molded from his own face. Martre eagerly accepted help from Denise and Latoya to prepare this project, believing they were supporting his academic dreams. On the morning of the 12th day of March in the year 2017, Martre's sisters, Michelle and Marquesha, visited the home. They celebrated a family birthday and dropped Martre off so he could finalize his preparations for his upcoming trip to Florida. Martre was excited, looking forward to starting a new chapter of his life away from the mounting tension in the household. This was the last time his sisters would see him alive. Shortly after his sisters departed, a series of deeply disturbing events took place inside the home. While Maurice was away at his shift at a food processing facility, where records show he worked from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, Martre was left alone with Denise and her daughters. The youngest daughter, then 12 years old, was in her bedroom watching television when she heard a sudden commotion and shouting coming from Martre's room. Peeking into the hallway, she witnessed a scene of physical confrontation with her mother and sister holding Martre down on the floor. She noticed something white covering his face, resembling the plaster mask project. Upon catching her daughter's eye, Denise gestured for her to return to her room and remain silent. Later that afternoon, the young girl heard a heavy dragging sound in the hallway. Looking out once more, she saw her older sister, Latoya, maneuvering a large plastic storage container down the corridor. The dark reality of what had transpired was Sipei-Tay, hidden from the rest of the family. When Martre's girlfriend tried to contact him later that day, she received no response. This was highly unusual, as the couple routinely communicated throughout the day. Convinced that something was wrong, she made dozens of calls to his phone and contacted his sisters. The following morning, Michelle and Marquesha returned to the home to investigate. Denise greeted them calmly, claiming that Martre had realized he left his wallet at Michelle's house while packing and had walked out to retrieve it. She suggested he must have proceeded directly to his trip from there. Unpersuaded by this explanation, the sisters searched the neighborhood but found no sign of their brother. On the morning of the 13th day of March, they filed a missing persons report with the local police department. Because Martre was 19 years old and legally an adult, authorities did not immediately initiate an active search, assuming he may have chosen to depart on his own. The truth began to surface on the 2nd day of April in the year 2017. A citizen taking a break from work in Henrico County noticed a large, discarded gray storage bin in a wooded area. Upon closer investigation, he observed what appeared to be a shoe protruding from the container and immediately contacted the authorities. Investigators arrived at the scene and discovered the body of a young male, bound and carefully placed inside the container. The body was covered in a white, powdery substance, later identified as lime, which had been applied in a misguided attempt to prevent natural decomposition and obscure the time of passing. Through a search of active missing persons reports and a comparison of identification records, detectives confirmed the identity of the deceased as Martre Lamonte Coles. To gain an investigative advantage and prevent the suspects from destroying evidence, law enforcement made the strategic decision to keep the discovery confidential, allowing the public and the family to believe that Martre was still considered a missing person. A breakthrough in the case occurred when an officer recalled responding to a security alarm at the Coles residence on a night in late March, approximately 2 weeks after Martre had disappeared. The alarm had been triggered during a domestic dispute between Denise's daughters. During that response, the 12-year-old daughter had quietly approached an officer she recognized and shared a frightening memory of witnessing her mother and sister pinning Martre to the floor, followed by the sight of a plastic bin being wheeled down the hallway. At the time, the report had been noted but not actively pursued, as it was viewed as a potential fabrication stemming from a sibling dispute. However, with the discovery of Martre's body in an identical container, detectives realized the child had provided an accurate eyewitness account. With this critical information, investigators secured a search warrant for the residence, executing it on the 3rd day of April. During the search, detectives recovered Martre's personal belongings, including his computer and backpack, which suggested he had never actually departed for his trip. Laptops belonging to Denise and Martre were seized and sent to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for forensic analysis. During the execution of the search warrant, LaToya Gay arrived at the property. Visibly agitated by the police presence, she quickly departed in her vehicle. Detectives quietly followed her, observing as she drove directly to the remote wooded location where Martre's body had been recovered just a day prior. This action strongly indicated her direct involvement, as the location of the recovery had not been disclosed to the public or the family. To gather further evidence, investigators placed a motion-activated camera near the site. On the evening of the 7th day of April, the camera captured images of a dark sports utility vehicle parking near the woods, and a figure wearing a hooded sweatshirt approaching the area. The vehicle possessed distinct custom wheels, matching a sports utility vehicle owned by Maurice Coles, which was regularly driven by Denise. By examining electronic time cards and security footage from the Smithfield processing facility, investigators confirmed that Maurice Coles was at work during the time the vehicle was photographed at the site. Conversely, records showed that Denise had left work early that day. Global positioning system data from her mobile phone tracked her journey directly from the facility to the vicinity of the recovery site, establishing a clear link between her movements and the crime scene. On the 10th day of April, Denise Gay was taken into custody. When confronted with the evidence, she denied any involvement, maintaining her innocence. Shortly thereafter, authorities located LaToya Gay in South Carolina, where she had fled to stay with relatives, and placed her under arrest. It was only after these arrests were secured that investigators met with Martre S. sisters to gently break the devastating news of his passing. The forensic analysis of Denise's laptop provided the final pieces of the puzzle. Investigators discovered that the email account for Sheila Crenshaw had been created and accessed directly from Denise's computer. The search history revealed inquiries regarding the properties of lime, sedation methods, and suffocation. Denise had fabricated the entire college admissions process, exploiting Martre's passion for art to lure him into a vulnerable position and construct an alibi for his sudden absence. In December of the year 2017, Denise and LaToya Gay stood trial. The prosecution presented the digital evidence, the surveillance footage, and the testimony of the youngest daughter. However, the defense attempted to cast doubt on the young girl's testimony, and the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict on the primary charges, resulting in a hung jury, though both were convicted of conspiracy. Determined to seek justice, prosecutors prepared for a retrial. Prior to the second trial, Maurice Coles discovered Denise's purse hidden in a closet. Inside, investigators found her mobile phone and a receipt for the purchase of a shovel. The phone contained text messages between Denise and LaToya from the evening of the 7th day of April, discussing their inability to locate the container in the dark. This definitive proof cemented the identity of the hooded figure captured by the motion-activated camera. With this overwhelming noe kep evidence, the second trial concluded with successful convictions. Both women were found guilty of first-degree murder. Denise Gay was sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 10 years, while LaToya Gay received a sentence of 30 years. The tragic loss of Martre Lamonte Coles remains a somber reminder of the devastating impact of domestic malice. But the tireless efforts of law enforcement and the ultimate triumph of justice ensure that his memory is honored. Martre is remembered by his family and community not for the tragedy that took him, but as a kind, brilliant, and artistic soul whose passion for creativity continues to inspire those who knew him. The human mind possesses a remarkable capacity for beote, hot, profound creativity, and devastating deception. Within the structure of any community, the home is traditionally viewed as a sanctuary, a place where individuals find comfort, support, and protection from the challenges of the external world. However, history demonstrates that some of the most complex and troubling events occur when this sanctuary is compromised from within, transformed by envy, resentment, and manipulation. When relationships that should be built on trust are instead utilized as instruments of malice, the resulting consequences can reverberate through families and communities for generations. The investigation of such occurrences requires not only technical precision from law enforcement, but also a deep understanding of human psychology, behavioral patterns, and the subtle warning signs that often precede a crisis. By analyzing these occurrences with a focus on logic, evidence, and the triumph of justice, society can gain valuable insights into the preservation of safety, the importance of vigilance, and the necessity of supporting vulnerable individuals. On April 2, 2017, in the city of Richmond, Virginia, an ordinary workday was interrupted by an unexpected and troubling discovery. A citizen was taking a routine break from his employment walking through a wooded area near his workplace to clear his mind and enjoy a brief respite. As he traversed the path, his attention was drawn to a large, dark-colored plastic storage container manufactured by the Rubbermaid Company. The presence of such an object in a natural environment was unusual, but what truly caught his attention was the sight of a shoe protruding slightly from the edge of the container. Driven by curiosity and a growing sense of unease, the citizen approached the container and lifted the lid. Upon doing so, he was confronted with the unmistakable and tragic sight of a deceased human being. Disturbed by the discovery, the citizen immediately contacted the emergency dispatch services to report what he had found, describing the situation with a mixture of shock and urgency. Law enforcement officers and homicide investigators arrived at the scene shortly after receiving the report. They secured the area to preserve any potential evidence and began a methodical examination of the surroundings. The container was positioned in a secluded section of the woods, suggesting that whoever had placed it there desired to hide the body from casual observation. Upon opening the container fully, detectives observed the body of a young black male, positioned in a highly compressed manner with the knees drawn up toward the chest, resembling the folding of an accordion. The investigators noted that a white powdery substance covered the body. This substance was later identified as lime, a chemical compound historically known as calcium hydroxide, which is sometimes mistakenly believed by criminals to accelerate decomposition or, conversely, to preserve human remains in a way that obscures the precise time of death. The detectives hypothesized that the individual who placed the body in the container utilized the chemical to complicate any subsequent forensic investigations and to make it more difficult for medical examiners to determine when the death had occurred. As the crime scene technicians prepared to remove the body from the container, they carefully rolled the plastic bin onto a white sheet laid upon the grass. It was during this process that they discovered another critical piece of evidence. The wrists of the deceased youth were bound behind his back with purple athletic tape. Despite the restraint, there were no visible cuts on the skin, no significant bruising on the body, and no obvious signs of physical trauma that would immediately indicate a struggle or the application of external force. The absence of external trauma presented a challenge for the investigators, as it suggested that the cause of death might not be immediately apparent without a detailed medical examination. To establish the identity of the deceased, investigators searched the law enforcement databases for active missing persons reports in the region. They soon located a report that had been filed several weeks prior by the family of a 19-year-old male named Martra Trey Coles. By comparing the photograph on the official identification card from the Department of Motor Vehicles with the physical features of the deceased, the investigators were able to confirm that the body in the container was indeed that of Martra Trey Coles. The confirmation of the identity of the young man marked the beginning of a complex and sensitive homicide investigation. Martre had been missing for several weeks, and yet his family had not been notified of the discovery of his body. This was a deliberate and strategic decision made by the leadership of the police department. The investigators believed that by keeping the discovery of the body confidential, they could maintain an advantage over the perpetrator, who would assume that Martre was still considered merely a missing person. This strategic silence allowed detectives to monitor the actions and statements of those close to the young man without alerting any potential suspects that an active homicide investigation was underway. The primary objective was to gather information, analyze relationships, and reconstruct the final days of the life of Martre. Martre Trey Coles was born on October 22, 1997, and was the youngest of 8 children raised by Maurice and Karina Coles. As the youngest child in a large family, Martre was described by his siblings as someone who was quiet, sensitive, and deeply attached to his mother. He spent a great deal of time in her company, accompanying her on errands, and learning from her gentle nature. From an early age, Martre demonstrated a passion and talent for the visual arts, an interest that was nurtured by his maternal grandfather, who introduced him to the fundamentals of drawing. For Martre, drawing was not merely a hobby, but a source of peace and self-expression. As he grew older, he began to focus his artistic talents on the field of video game design, aspiring to attend a specialized university where he could learn to create the visual concepts and characters for digital entertainment. The course of the life of Martre was profoundly altered in 2014, when his mother passed away suddenly from a heart attack. The loss of his mother had a devastating impact on the 17-year-old youth. His siblings observed a significant change in his personality, noting that he appeared lost, withdrawn, and struggled with symptoms of depression. The absence of the primary source of support in his life left Martre feeling isolated and uncertain about how to proceed with his future. His older siblings had already established their own households, leaving Martre alone in the family residence with his grieving father, Maurice. Both father and son were dealing with their own deep sorrow, and the shared grief sometimes made communication difficult between them, as each struggled to process the loss of Karina in their own way. During this period of vulnerability, a friend and co-worker of Maurice named Denise Gay began to offer her assistance to the family. Denise was a single mother who was raising 5 children of her own. She presented herself as a compassionate and supportive figure, offering a sympathetic ear to Maurice and taking an interest in the well-being of Martre. Over time, the supportive friendship between Maurice and Denise transitioned into a romantic relationship. Denise began to spend more time at the residence, presenting herself as a maternal figure who could help Martre navigate his grief. She assured the young man that she was not seeking to replace his mother, but rather to serve as a supportive presence in his life. Before long, Maurice invited Denise and her youngest daughter to move into the family home, creating a blended family arrangement. The integration of Denise into the household was met ve kep et hot, varying reactions from the children of Maurice. The older daughters of Maurice, Michelle and Markeisha Coles, harbored reservations about the rapid pace of the relationship. They found it unusual that another woman would move into the home of their late mother within such a short period of time, and they felt an instinctive sense of unease regarding the motivations of Denise. Martre, however, gradually began to accept the presence of Denise, encouraged by her apparent willingness to support his artistic aspirations and assist him with his studies. By 2017, Martre seemed to be making progress in his recovery from grief. He had initiated a relationship with a girlfriend whom he had met in high school, and the two communicated frequently throughout the day. He was also beginning to form a bond with the children of Denise, sharing his interest in technology and game development with them. The aspirations of Martre were focused on attending Full Sail University, a well-known institution located in Florida that offered specialized programs in the arts and entertainment industries. Denise appeared to be actively assisting him in this endeavor, communicating with representatives and helping him coordinate the details of his application. Martre was highly enthusiastic about the prospect of starting a new chapter in his life, viewing the opportunity as a chance to develop his skills and find independence. However, the investigation into his disappearance would soon reveal that the promising future he envisioned was being systematically undermined by a web of deception. Following the discovery of the body, the medical examiner conducted an autopsy to determine the precise cause of death. The findings indicated that Martre had died of asphyxiation. Furthermore, toxicological analysis revealed the presence of two distinct substances in his bloodstream. The first substance was trazodone, a prescription medication commonly utilized to treat depression and insomnia due to its sedative effects. The second substance was gamma-hydroxybutyrate, a powerful central nervous system depressant often associated with drug-facilitated assaults due to its ability to induce drowsiness and rapid unconsciousness. The presence of these substances suggested a highly calculated sequence of events. Investigators theorized that Martre had been surreptitiously drugged with these medications, rendering him incapacitated. While in a state of deep sedation or unconsciousness, he was placed into the plastic storage container in the compressed position, where he ultimately succumbed to lack of oxygen. The coldness and planning required to execute such an act pointed to a perpetrator who possessed intimate access to the victim and a complete disregard for human life. To reconstruct the events leading to the disappearance of Martre, investigators reviewed the missing persons report filed by his sisters on March 13, 2017. The report detailed that the last time the sisters had seen their brother was on March 12th, during a family gathering to celebrate a birthday. After the gathering, they returned Martre to his residence so that he could prepare for an upcoming trip to Florida to visit Full Sail University. According to the information provided by Denise, Martre was working on a final art project for his application, which involved creating a plaster mask of his own face. Later that day, the sisters received numerous urgent telephone calls from the girlfriend of Martre, who expressed deep concern because she had not received any responses to her messages, which was highly unusual for the couple. When Michelle and Markeisha returned to the family home to investigate the situation, Denise informed them that Martre had already departed. She claimed that while he was packing his belongings, he realized he had left his wallet at the residence of Michelle. Denise asserted that the last time she saw Martre, he was walking out of the house with the intention of traveling on foot to the home of his sister to retrieve the wallet. The sisters immediately searched the surrounding neighborhood, but found no sign of their brother. The following morning, they filed a missing persons report with the local police department. Because Martre was 19 years old and legally an adult, the initial response did not involve an active search, as there was no immediate evidence of foul play or involuntary disappearance. As the homicide investigators analyzed the timeline, a critical breakthrough occurred when another officer within the police department recalled a separate incident that had taken place at the Coles residence approximately 2 weeks after Martre went missing. Late one evening, a home security alarm had been activated at the house, prompting a response from 2 patrol officers. Upon arrival, the officers encountered LaToya Gay, the oldest daughter of Denise, and the 12-year-old youngest daughter of Denise. The officers were informed that the alarm had been triggered during a minor domestic dispute between the 2 sisters. Because the officers were equipped with body-worn cameras, the entire interaction was recorded. Before the officers departed the residence, the 12-year-old daughter requested a private conversation with one of the officers whom she recognized from previous community interactions. Once they were out of earshot of her older sister, the young girl disclosed a deeply disturbing story. She stated that on the morning of March 12th, while she was in her bedroom watching television, she heard a loud scream emanating from the room of Martre. She walked into the hallway and looked through the open doorway of his bedroom. The young girl claimed she saw her mother, Denise, and her sister, Latoya, pinning Martre to the floor. She described seeing a white substance on the face of Martre. She further stated that her mother noticed her presence and made a hand gesture directing her to return to her room. Shortly thereafter, she heard a dragging sound in the hallway and observed her sister, Latoya, pushing a large plastic storage bin down the corridor. At the time of the initial report, the responding officers had contacted Denise to discuss the statements of her youngest daughter. Denise dismissed the allegations, claiming that her youngest daughter possessed an overactive imagination and was merely fabricating the story to cause trouble for her older sister, Latoya, with whom she had been arguing. Under the influence of the explanation of the mother, the officers documented the statement but did not pursue an immediate investigation. As there was no independent evidence of a crime at that moment. However, when the homicide investigators reviewed this report, in light of the discovery of the body of Martre inside a plastic bin in the woods, they realized that the specific details provided by the 12-year-old girl were remarkably accurate. The correlation between her description of a plastic bin and the actual container containing the body of Martre strongly indicated that the young girl had witnessed the commission of a crime. This realization shifted the focus of the investigation directly toward Denise Gay and Latoya Gay. On April 3, 2017, investigators obtained a search warrant for the residence of Maurice Coles. When the officers arrived to execute the warrant, the home was unoccupied. A thorough search of the bedroom of Martre revealed that all of his personal belongings, including his computer, his backpack, and his clothing, were still present in the room. This finding directly contradicted the narrative that he had departed for a college visit in Florida. The presence of his essential belongings suggested that he had never left the home voluntarily. During the execution of the search warrant, Latoya Gay arrived at the residence. Investigators observed that her behavior was marked by extreme agitation and discomfort. Instead of entering the home, she remained outside, entered her vehicle, and engaged in a lengthy telephone conversation. She then abruptly departed the scene before the search was completed. Sensing that her behavior was highly suspicious, detectives directed surveillance officers to follow her vehicle. Latoya drove directly to the remote wooded location where the body of Martre had been discovered the previous day. Because the police had not released any public information regarding the discovery of the body or its location, the only way Latoya could have known to travel to that specific spot was if she possessed first-hand knowledge of the crime. This action provided investigators with a clear link between the suspects and the location of the victim. To gather further evidence, investigators placed a motion-activated camera on a tree near the site where the container had been found. On the evening of April 7, 2017, the camera captured images of a dark-colored sports utility vehicle parked near the entrance of the wooded path, followed by a silhouette of an individual wearing a hooded sweatshirt entering the area. Upon analyzing the images, detectives noted that the vehicle possessed distinctive, custom wheels. This vehicle matched the description of the large black sports utility vehicle owned by Maurice Coles, which was primarily driven by Maurice and Denise. This discovery raised the troubling question of whether Maurice was also involved in the conspiracy against his son. To resolve this question, detectives conducted a meticulous review of the employment records and security footage at the processing plant in Smithfield, Virginia, where both Maurice and Denise were employed. The plant was located approximately 90 minutes away from the location where the body was found. By analyzing the electronic time cards and parking lot surveillance, investigators confirmed that Maurice was actively working at the facility during the evening of April 7th, establishing a verified alibi for him. In contrast, the records indicated that Denise had departed from her shift early on that date. Surveillance footage showed her entering the black sports utility vehicle, and subsequent analysis of her mobile telephone records using global positioning system data tracked her movement from the workplace directly to the vicinity of the dump site in Richmond. This evidence established that Denise was the individual operating the vehicle and visiting the location where the body had been hidden, likely to verify if the container remained undisturbed. With sufficient evidence compiled, investigators arrested Denise Gay on April 10, 2017, charging her with homicide and conspiracy. When presented with the allegations during her interrogation, Denise maintained a posture of complete denial, asserting that she had no knowledge of the events. Meanwhile, investigators determined that LaToya Gay had fled the jurisdiction of Virginia. She was subsequently located and arrested by law enforcement officers in South Carolina. Like her mother, LaToya did not cooperate with the investigators, refusing to provide details regarding the circumstances of the death of Martre. The investigation then turned to the analysis of the digital evidence seized during the search of the home. The Federal Bureau of Investigation conducted a forensic examination of the laptops belonging to Denise and Martre. This analysis revealed a profound level of planning and deception. Investigators discovered that the email account associated with Sheila Crenshaw, the supposed university administrator who had been communicating with Martre, had been created and accessed from the laptop of Denise. The entire correspondence regarding his acceptance and the scheduled trip to Florida was a complete fabrication orchestrated by Denise. She had used this ruse to create a plausible explanation for the sudden absence of Martre, ensuring that his family and girlfriend would believe he was traveling out of state rather than suspecting foul play. Furthermore, the search history on the computer of Denise revealed queries regarding the properties of lime, the effects of gamma-hydroxybutyrate, and methods of suffocation, providing clear evidence of premeditation. The motive behind this tragic crime was rooted in the complex psychological dynamics of the household. Following the passing of his first wife, Maurice had found comfort in his relationship with Denise. However, investigators believed that Denise developed a profound and irrational jealousy toward the memory of the late Karina Coles. She viewed Martre as a living reminder of the former life of Maurice and the deep love he had shared with his first wife. Denise sought to establish complete control over the household and the affection of Maurice, and she perceived Martre as an obstacle to this objective. To achieve her goals, she engaged in a systematic campaign to undermine Martre, encouraging conflicts between him and her own children, and presenting him to Maurice as a source of disruption. When these efforts did not result in his departure, she devised a calculated plan to eliminate him entirely, utilizing her oldest daughter as an accomplice and exploiting the aspirations of Martre to lure him into a fatal trap. The human mind possesses a remarkable capacity for beote hat profound creativity and devastate deception. In the quiet neighborhoods of our communities, behind closed doors, family structures are constantly evolving, blending, and adapting to life's unpredictable changes. While many such families find ways to integrate through love and mutual support, some environments harbor hidden undercurrents of jealousy, resentment, and manipulation. The tragic loss of a young, promising life within a domestic setting represents one of the most challenging mysteries for law enforcement to solve, requiring not only meticulous physical detective work, but also a deep understanding of human psychology, digital footprints, and the subtle clues that criminals inevitably leave behind. By examining these complex cases, we can understand the underlying motives of perpetrators, appreciate the brilliant strategies employed by investigators, and extract valuable life lessons to protect our loved ones from similar harms. To understand why hat domestic crimes occur and how they can be prevented, we must first analyze the deep-seated motives that drive individuals to commit acts of extreme malice against members of their own household. In many instances, the primary catalyst is not a sudden outburst of passion, but rather a slow, simmering resentment. When a new parental figure enters a household following a tragedy, such as the passing of a biological parent, the delicate balance of the home is disrupted. The new partner may perceive the biological children of the previous marriage as living reminders of a past they wish to erase. This psychological displacement can turn into an intense, irrational jealousy. The perpetrator may view the child's talents, their close connection to the remaining parent, and even their very presence as obstacles to absolute control over the family dynamic. This motive is often compounded by a history of fraudulent behavior, where the individual has spent years relying on lies, deceit, and manipulation to navigate life. When such a person is faced with a young, intelligent individual who can see through their facade, the perpetrator may decide that the only way to maintain their influence is to permanently remove the source of their insecurity. The frequency of these domestic tragedies often stems from a lack of early intervention and the isolated nature of household conflicts. Many families choose to keep internal disputes private, believing that they can handle behavioral issues or growing tensions without external assistance. This isolation creates a dangerous vacuum where emotional abuse, manipulation, and physical threats can escalate unchecked. Neighbors, friends, and even extended family members may observe subtle warning signs, such as a teenager withdrawing from social activities, sudden changes in their living environment, or unresolved disputes between step-siblings, but they often hesitate to intervene out of respect for family privacy. Furthermore, younger children within the household are frequently caught in the middle, witnessing troubling behavior but lacking the agency or the understanding to seek help from trusted authorities. This silence allows manipulative individuals to exploit the vulnerabilities of their victims, orchestrating elaborate schemes under the guise of parental guidance and care. When tracking down perpetrators in these intricate domestic cases, the police must rely on a combination of traditional investigative techniques and advanced forensic science. The most important details and clues often emerge from the inconsistencies in the suspect's timeline and the digital footprints they leave behind. In the modern era, criminals frequently underestimate the permanence and traceability of their electronic communications. Investigators carefully analyze electronic mail exchanges, cellular telephone location data, and Internet search histories to dismantle the elaborate alibis constructed by perpetrators. For instance, when a suspect claims a victim has departed for a distant location, detectives will immediately verify this claim by contacting the supposed destination, analyzing the technical details of the communication, and searching for any records that would support the journey. A generic electronic mail address used to communicate official university business is a major red flag that immediately alerts investigators to a potential fraud. In addition to digital forensics, physical surveillance, and the monitoring of suspect behavior after a crime has been discovered, are critical to solving the mystery. Perpetrators, driven by anxiety and the desire to ensure their actions remain hidden, often make critical mistakes, such as returning to the location where evidence was concealed. By maintaining strict confidentiality regarding the progress of an investigation, law enforcement can observe how suspects react to the unfolding situation. The use of modern surveillance equipment, such as motion-activated cameras placed near key locations, allows police to capture visual evidence without alerting the suspects. When a vehicle associated with the suspect is spotted at a critical location during unusual hours, it provides a powerful link that connects the individual directly to the crime. Furthermore, the police rely heavily on the testimonies of unexpected eyewitnesses, particularly younger children who may have witnessed portions of the crime or heard suspicious activities. While children are sometimes dismissed by suspects as having overactive imaginations, experienced detectives know that the specific, detailed descriptions provided by a child can hold the key to the entire case. When a child describes events that align perfectly with the physical evidence found at a crime scene, such as the specific manner in which a body was concealed, investigators recognize the absolute truth of their statement. This physical and testimonial alignment allows law enforcement to bypass the lies of the adult suspects and focus their efforts on gathering the necessary evidence to secure a conviction. The sophistication of criminals in these cases is often a mixture of elaborate planning and astonishing foolishness. A perpetrator may spend weeks constructing a highly complex ruse, fabricating entire personas, sending fake electronic mails, and acquiring specific materials to delay the discovery of their actions. They may attempt to utilize chemical substances to alter the natural processes of decay, believing that this will prevent forensic specialists from determining the timing and cause of death. They may even manipulate their own children into participating in the crime, exploiting their loyalty and dependence to assist in the cover-up. However, despite this initial sophistication, the criminal's plan almost always crumbles due to their inability to account for every variable. They leave behind Internet search histories on their personal computers. They retain physical receipts for suspicious purchases in their personal belongings, and they send incriminating text messages that are eventually retrieved by forensic experts. This inherent loophole in the criminal mind, where they believe they are far more intelligent than the collective forces of justice, ultimately leads to their downfall. We can draw profound life lessons from these tragic events to prevent such occurrences in our own communities. First and foremost, we must prioritize open, honest communication within our families. When young people express feelings of discomfort, depression, or fear within their own homes, their concerns must be taken seriously and validated by those who care for them. Siblings, extended family members, and teachers should actively listen to teenagers who seem to be withdrawing or who describe unusual conflicts with step-parents or step-siblings. It is vital to establish a network of support outside the immediate household, ensuring that a young person always has a safe place to turn if the environment at home becomes hostile or dangerous. Another critical lesson is the importance of verifying important life events and communications through official channels. When a young adult is applying to universities, seeking employment, or preparing for significant travel, family members should encourage them to use official portals, contact administrative offices directly through verified phone numbers, and avoid relying solely on third-party intermediaries who claim to handle the arrangements. Any communication that comes from a non-professional, generic electronic mail service or contains poor grammar and unusual requests should be treated with immediate suspicion. By teaching our youth to be digitally literate and cautious, we can protect them from falsing victim to elaborate deceptions designed to isolate them from their support networks. Furthermore, we must pay close attention to the behavior of younger children in households undergoing significant transitions. Children are highly perceptive and often notice details that adults overlook. If a child displays sudden behavioral changes, acts out, or tries to share a troubling story, parents, educators, and counselors must listen with empathy and investigate the underlying cause. We must never dismiss a child's testimony as mere imagination without careful consideration, especially when it involves the safety and well-being of another family member. By fostering an environment where children feel safe speaking the truth to authorities and trusted adults, we can uncover hidden dangers before they lead to irreversible tragedies. To assist law enforcement in catching perpetrators faster, community members can share valuable experiences and cooperate fully with investigations. When a loved one goes missing or ceases communication unexpectedly, family members should act quickly to document every detail, including recent conversations, electronic mail exchanges, and potential conflicts. Keeping a detailed record of the victim's digital accounts, friends, and daily routines can provide immediate directions for investigators. When contacting the police, sharing any suspicions regarding household dynamics, even if they seem minor at the time, can help detectives identify potential leads early in the process. Law enforcement agencies can also expedite investigations by utilizing rapid multi-agency collaboration, bringing in specialized digital forensic units and federal investigators at the first sign of foul play. The integration of body-worn camera technology during routine calls, such as domestic dispute responses, has proven to be an invaluable tool. By reviewing this footage, detectives can identify critical statements made by household members during moments of stress, which may later serve as the foundation for a major breakthrough. Additionally, maintaining a database of past domestic calls and analyzing patterns of behavior within a specific residence can help police recognize when a situation has escalated from a simple dispute to a serious criminal matter. Let us now reflect deeply on the specific events that unfolded in Richmond, Virginia, in the spring of 2017. A case that serves as a powerful reminder of both the darkness of human deception and the relentless pursuit of justice. The story begins on the afternoon of April 2nd, 2017. The weather was mild, and a local resident was taking a brief smoke break from his workday, walking through a quiet wooded area near the road. As he walked, his eyes caught sight of a strange large object resting among the trees and fallen leaves. It was a dark, plastic storage container, a common household item manufactured by the Rubbermaid Company. Curiosity led the man closer to the container. As he approached, he noticed what appeared to be the sole of a shoe protruding from beneath the lid. Sensing that something was deeply wrong, he stepped forward and lifted the plastic cover. In that shocking moment, he realized he was looking at the motionless body of a young human being. Trembling and unsure of what to do, the man immediately contacted the authorities. He explained to the emergency dispatcher that he had discovered a body in the woods, confirming that there were no signs of breathing or life. Within minutes, homicide detectives and forensic units arrived at the scene. They secured the area and began their meticulous documentation of the site, taking numerous photographs of the container and its surroundings. When they carefully removed the lid of the box, they observed the body of a young African-American male. The position of the individual was heartbreaking, described by investigators as being folded like an accordion, with his knees tightly tucked against his chest to fit inside the confined space. As the forensic team began their examination, they noticed a white, powdery substance covering the individual's clothing and skin. The detectives quickly identified this substance as lime, a chemical compound often used in agricultural settings, but also known in forensic contexts for its ability to alter the natural decomposition of organic material. The presence of the lime suggested a calculated attempt by the perpetrator to mask the timing of the individual's passing and to make it difficult for medical examiners to determine the exact cause of death. With great care, the detectives laid a clean white sheet on the grass beside the container. They gently rolled the bin over to extricate the body, exposing the back of the young man. It was at this moment that they discovered another critical clue. His wrists had been bound behind his back with a distinctive purple, athletic-style adhesive tape. Upon closer examination of the skin, the investigators noted a lack of deep bruising, cuts, or obvious physical trauma that would indicate a violent struggle or the use of weapons. This lack of external injuries suggested that the young man might have been incapacitated before being placed in the container. To identify the victim, the investigators searched the law enforcement database for recent missing persons reports in the surrounding counties. They quickly located a potential match filed 20 days earlier, on March 13, 2017, by two sisters who were deeply concerned about their younger brother, Martre Trey Coles. The detectives retrieved Martre's photograph from the Department of Motor Vehicles database and compared it with the features of the young man in the container. The match was undeniable. They had found the body of 19-year-old Martre Coles. Rather than immediately announcing the discovery to the public or even to Martre's family, the leadership of the police department made a strategic decision to keep the information confidential. They believed that by keeping the discovery quiet, they could maintain an advantage over whoever had committed this act. If the perpetrator believed that Martre was still considered a simple missing person, they might let their guard down, return to their normal routines, or make careless statements that would expose their guilt. As the detectives began to piece together Martre's life, they discovered a story of resilience, talent, and deep personal loss. Martre Trey Coles was born on October 22, 1997. He was the youngest of 8 children born to Maurice and Karina Coles. Because of the significant age gap between Martre and his older siblings, who had already grown up and moved out of the family home, Martre spent much of his childhood as a quiet, introspective youth, closely attached to his mother. He was described by those who knew him as a sensitive, highly intelligent, and humorous young man who possessed a natural gift for the visual arts. Martre's maternal grandfather had introduced him to drawing at an early age, and the young man found a sense of peace and purpose in his artwork. He dreamed of turning his passion into a career, specifically aiming to work in the video game industry as a concept artist and designer. However, his life was turned upside down in the year 2014 when his beloved mother suddenly passed away from a heart attack. The loss of his primary source of emotional support had a devastating impact on the 17-year-old Martre. He experienced a deep, silent depression, struggling to find his footing in a world without his mother. Following Karina's passing, Martre was left living in the family home with only his grieving father, Maurice. Both father and son were dealing with their immense grief in their own ways, often finding it difficult to communicate or support one another effectively during such a painful transition. Seeing the vulnerability of the household, a co-worker and friend of Maurice, a woman named Denise Gay, began to offer her assistance. Denise was a single mother who was raising 5 children of her own. She presented herself as a compassionate, supportive figure, offering a shoulder to cry on for Maurice and attempting to build a maternal bond with Martre. Over time, Denise's presence in the home grew, and her relationship with Maurice blossomed into a romance. Within a short period, Maurice invited Denise and her youngest daughter to move into the residence. While Maurice was pleased to have companionship and support, Martre's older sisters viewed the situation with a degree of skepticism. They found it unusual that another woman would move into their deceased mother's home so quickly, and they felt an intuitive sense of unease regarding Denise's true motives. Mart, however, in his desire for stability, gradually warmed up to Denise after she assured him that she was not trying to replace his mother, but simply wanted to be there for him as a supportive adult. By the early months of 2017, Martre seemed to be making positive strides in his life. He had begun dating a young woman whom he had met in high school, and the two communicated constantly throughout the day, sharing their hopes and dreams. He also bonded with Denise's older children, particularly sharing a mutual interest in the gaming industry with one of them. Martre's primary focus was his application to Full Sail University, a well-known institution in Florida that offered specialized programs in computer animation and digital art. Denise appeared to be actively assisting him in this process, helping him correspond with admissions counselors and organizing a tour of the campus. However, behind this facade of domestic harmony, serious conflicts were brewing. As the detectives interviewed Martre's older sisters, Michelle and Markeisha, they learned that the household dynamic had become increasingly tense. While Martre tried to keep to himself and focus on his art, he frequently clashed with Denise's youngest daughter, a troubled 12-year-old child who exhibited aggressive and unusual behavior. The sisters revealed that this young girl would purposely destroy Martre's belongings, draw on the floors of the house to frame him for misconduct, and pick physical fights. In one particularly alarming incident, the young girl reportedly attacked Martre with a pair of scissors, causing a minor injury to his head. When Martre attempted to inform his father about these incidents, Denise would intervene, manipulating the situation to blame Martre and protect her daughter. The sisters believed that Denise was actively trying to drive a wedge between Martre and his father Maurice, out of a deep, irrational jealousy of the memory of Martre's late mother. Martre felt increasingly isolated and unwelcome in his own home, which only intensified his desire to attend college in Florida and start a new life. The sisters explained that the last time they saw Martre was on March 12, 2017, during a family birthday gathering. Michelle had driven him back to his father's house so that he could pack his bags and put the finishing touches on a special art project required for his university application. This project was a plaster mask of his own face, which he planned to take with him on his trip to Florida. The sisters wished him well, believing he was about to embark on an exciting new chapter. However, the very next morning, Michelle woke up to find dozens of missed calls on her telephone from Martre's girlfriend. The girlfriend was frantic, stating that Martre had suddenly stopped responding to her text messages, which was completely uncharacteristic of him. Worried, Michelle and Markeisha drove to their father's house to check on their brother. When they arrived, Denise met them at the door and informed them that Martre had already departed. She claimed that while he was packing his bags, he realized he had left his wallet at Michelle's residence. Denise asserted that the last time she saw Martre, he was walking down the street to retrieve his wallet. The sisters immediately searched the neighborhood, driving up and down the streets, but found no sign of their brother. They proceeded to the local police precinct to file a missing person report. Because Martre was 19 years old and legally an adult, the initial response from the authorities was limited. As there was no immediate evidence of foul play, the family was left in a state of agonizing suspense, hoping that Martre had simply gone ahead to Florida and would soon make contact. As the homicide investigators analyzed the missing person report, alongside the discovery of the body, they uncovered a startling connection to a police call that had occurred at the Coles residence just 2 weeks after Martre's disappearance. On that night, a security alarm had been activated at the home, prompting 2 local police officers to respond to the scene. Upon their arrival, they found Denise's oldest daughter, Latoya Gay, and her 12-year-old sister. Latoya explained to the officers that her younger sister had activated the alarm during a childish temper tantrum. The officers, whose interactions were recorded on their body-worn cameras, resolved the minor dispute and prepared to leave. However, the 12-year-old girl quietly asked to speak with one of the officers privately. Once they were out of earshot of her sister, she revealed a terrifying story. She stated that, on the morning of March 12, 2017, she was in her bedroom watching television when she heard a sudden muffled scream coming from Martre's bedroom next door. Intrigued and frightened, the young girl crept into the hallway and looked through the open door of Martre's room. She described seeing her mother Denise and her older sister Latoya pinning Martre to the floor. She recalled seeing her mother sitting on Martre's chest while her sister held his feet. The girl noticed a white object covering Martre's face. Before she could investigate further, her mother caught her eye and made a sharp hand gesture, signaling her to leave immediately and go back to her room. The young girl complied, but a short time later, she heard a heavy scraping sound in the hallway. Peeking through her bedroom door once more, she saw her older sister, Latoya, pushing a large, plastic storage container down the corridor. At the time of the alarm call, the responding officers did not know that Martre was missing, and when they questioned Denise about her daughter's claims, Denise dismissed them as the fabrication of a troubled child seeking attention after a family argument. The officers filed a standard report and took no further action. But now, with Martre's body found in the exact type of container described by the young girl, The detectives realized that this child had witnessed a homicide. The specificity of her description matched the physical evidence perfectly, making her testimony a crucial element of the investigation. Denise Gay and her daughter LaToya were immediately identified as the primary suspects in the murder of Martre Coles. On April 3, 2017, the day after the body was found, detectives obtained a search warrant for the Coles residence. They arrived at the home when no one was present and began a thorough search of Martre's bedroom. They found that all of his personal belongings, including his computer, his backpack, his clothing, and his art supplies, were still in the room. There was absolutely no sign that he had packed for a trip to Florida. The detectives seized several electronic devices, including laptops belonging to both Martre and Denise, and forwarded them to the Digital Forensics Unit of the Federal Bureau of Investigation for analysis. While the search was underway, LaToya Gay unexpectedly arrived at the house. Observing the police activity, she appeared highly agitated and uncomfortable. Instead of entering the home, she sat in her vehicle and engaged in a lengthy, tense conversation on her cellular telephone before abruptly driving away. Recognizing her suspicious demeanor, detectives instructed plainclothes officers to follow her vehicle. LaToya's actions over the next hour confirmed their gravest suspicions. She drove directly to the quiet, wooded area where Martre's body had been discovered just 24 hours earlier. Because the police had not released any information about the discovery to the public or the family, the only way LaToya could have known the exact location of the container was if she had been involved in placing it there. It was clear to the investigators that she had returned to the site to see if the police had discovered their work. To gather further evidence, one of the investigators suggested placing a motion-activated hunting camera on a tree near the dump site, positioned to capture any vehicles or individuals returning to the area. 5 days later, on the evening of April 7, 2017, the camera captured a series of grainy images. The first image showed a large, dark sports utility vehicle parked at the entrance of the wooded path. The second image captured a silhouette of an individual wearing a hooded sweatshirt walking toward the site. The sports utility vehicle in the photograph possessed distinctive, flashy custom rims. Investigators quickly identified the vehicle as belonging to Martre's father, Maurice Coles. This discovery raised a troubling question. Did Maurice have a role in the death of his own son? The detectives knew that only Maurice and Denise had access to this specific vehicle. They immediately initiated a verification of Maurice's whereabouts on the night of April 7th. By contacting the processing plant in Smithfield, Virginia, where both Maurice and Denise worked, and reviewing the facility's security camera footage and electronic time cards, the detectives confirmed that Maurice was at work, over an hour and 30 minutes away from Richmond, when the photographs were taken. He was completely cleared of suspicion. However, the same records revealed that Denise had left her shift early that evening. Security cameras at the plant showed Denise leaving the building and driving away in the black sports utility vehicle. Furthermore, the detectives utilized cellular telephone tower data to track the movements of Denise's phone on the night of April 7th. The data plotted her route directly from the processing plant in Smithfield to the exact location of the dump site in Richmond, perfectly matching the timing of the photographs captured by the hidden camera. On April 10, 2017, detectives brought Denise Gay in for questioning. When confronted with the accusation of murder and the evidence that Martre's body had been found in a storage container, Denise maintained a cold, detached demeanor, denying any knowledge of the crime. Despite her denials, the police placed her under arrest. They then turned their attention to LaToya, who had fled the state. Investigators located her at a relative S home in South Carolina, where she was arrested on a warrant for murder. With the suspects in custody, the detectives finally delivered the tragic news to Martre's sisters. The sisters were devastated, but expressed a sense of relief that the individuals responsible had been apprehended. As the digital forensics team at the Federal Bureau of Investigation completed their analysis of Denise's laptop, they uncovered the full extent of her deception. The forensic experts located an electronic mail account registered under the name of Sheila Crenshaw on Denise's computer. This was the fictional admissions officer Denise had created to trick Martre. The Internet's search history on her computer also revealed searches for chemical substances like lime, the effects of gamma-hydroxybutyrate, and methods of suffocation, all conducted in the weeks leading up to Martre's disappearance. Denise had meticulously planned the crime, using Martre's dreams of attending art school to isolate him and create a believable cover story for his absence. The medical examiner's autopsy report provided the final scientific pieces of the puzzle. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation, and toxicology reports revealed the presence of trazodone, a prescription sleep aid, and gamma-hydroxybutyrate, a powerful central nervous system depressant in Martre's system. The prosecutors formulated a theory that Denise had drugged Martre's food or drink, and once he was incapacitated, she and LaToya had suffocated him, bound his wrists, and placed him in the container. On December 8, 2017, Denise and LaToya Gay stood trial for the murder of Martre Coles. The prosecution's case relied heavily on the circumstantial digital evidence, the testimony of the 12-year-old daughter, and the cellular telephone tracking data. The defense attempted to discredit the young girl, suggesting that she was the one responsible for the conflict in the home. Despite the compelling evidence, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict on the first-degree murder charges, resulting in a hung jury, though both women were convicted of conspiracy. Refusing to let the perpetrators escape justice, the prosecutors immediately prepared for a retrial. During this period, a critical breakthrough occurred. Maurice Coles, finally accepting the painful truth about the woman he had brought into his home, began clearing out Denise's belongings from the house. In a closet, he discovered her personal purse, which had been left behind. Inside the purse, he found a physical receipt for the purchase of a shovel and Denise's actual cellular telephone. When forensic analysts examined this phone, they discovered a series of text messages exchanged between Denise and LaToya on the night of April 7, 2017. In the messages, Denise expressed frustration that she could not locate the container in the dark, confirming that she was indeed the hooded figure captured by the hidden camera. This direct, undeniable evidence left no room for doubt. During the second trial, the prosecution presented this new evidence alongside the previous testimonies. The jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Denise Gay was sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 10 years, while LaToya Gay received a 30-year sentence for her role in the crime. The long journey for justice was finally complete. Martre Coles is remembered by his family and community not as a victim of a terrible crime, but as a kind, gentle, and extraordinarily talented young artist who loved his family and pursued his dreams. Vekepite, hat passion. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of vigilance. the strength of family bonds, and the tireless dedication of those who work to ensure that justice always prevails over darkness.